Welcome to The Problem, a Lockwood and Co podcast. I'm Caitlin.
I'm Alan.
This week, we will be talking about the first episode, This Will Be Us, written and directed by Joe Cornish, and credit to Jonathan Stroud, who wrote all the Lockwood and Co novels.
Yeah, this is like a pretty close adaptation for the first episode, I felt like. He's sticking pretty close to the books because the kickoff is like so strong. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. I remember watching this episode the first time and genuinely thinking to myself, are we still in the first chapter? Like by the time we get to the end, which like technically yes, but also no. But I just remember having no idea how they were going to be splitting up the book over, because I don't think I knew that they were doing two books when I started it. I genuinely don't remember. And so I was just like, how are they splitting this up? What is happening here? But it's a good episode. It might be my favorite episode of the season just because it's such a strong opener. It's
super smart. It's like so many good things about this episode, I think.
Before we dive into it, though, I did just want to shout out a social media account that is definitely on Tumblr, and I think it's on Twitter and Instagram also. The at Save Lockwood and Co handle, username, whatever.
Oh, cool.
When you, at least on Tumblr, they are the people who are saying, you know, today's hashtags are this, and you can post something about this. If you look them up, they talk about other shows that Netflix has canceled and that have successfully been picked up by other networks and why they think this one might has a chance and that sort of thing. They've got a lot of information, and they're kind of heading the save the show battle. Battle is the word I said there. Okay.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, it's like a organized campaign and not just like, oh, it should be organically grassroots or something. Like nothing works that way. There's always got to be some people at the head of the ship.
Yeah, but they're not involved with the show at all. So it is still kind of organically well, it's grassroots
totally,
at any rate. Yeah. So, but with some organization. So yeah, I just recommend, and they can link you to anything. They have like instructions on how to vote for where the show was nominated for Best Drama Series at the National Film Awards and everything going on there.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, because we mentioned Joe Cornish, and this is from his company.
Complete Fiction.
And let's say that again. I'm sorry.
Complete Fiction.
Complete Fiction, right? And this was, I don't know if you know this, but this was the first thing that they ever wanted to produce when the first book came out. Like they tried to get Lockwood and Co. and like wrote up a whole treatment about it when the first book came out years ago. And like, but then it went into movie rights and it just sat there and did nothing. And so as soon as the rights came back to where they could be adapted, they jumped on it. So they like really care about this franchise.
Yeah. I had read that they had bought the rights or had looked into the rights years ago, but I hadn't put together that like the books would not have been finished at the time.
Yeah, they just liked it on the strength of this first one. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive into episode 1, where we start with a view of the ghost lamp. I love these first like 3 minutes. They are perfection.
Yeah. It is. I'm trying to think, like, with the view of the ghost lamp. I don't remember that.
The camera sort of comes down and we see the light flickering on, and then the
you mean okay
pull up.
You mean the green lights?
Oh yeah.
That okay. So like this doesn't make any sense at all. But like you were talking about the ghost lamp, and I'm thinking of like the skull in the jar thing, and I'm like, but that's not a lamp, Alan. That's not how lamps work. They don't have skulls in them. But so like these green lights, I was like, okay, in London, are these just like, do they just have green lights everywhere? Is this a thing? But this is a world building thing, right?
Yes. I don't think the books ever actually say what the lights do or if they do anything. Maybe they make ghosts more visible. That's what I'm going to go with. And I don't think the show ever addresses them at all, other than they have this creepy kind of greenish light out at night. And I think it's great.
Oh, it's super atmospheric, and it like sets the color palette tone, especially for this episode, but like for the whole show, where it's like it's all greens and yellows, and stuff like that, which is like great atmosphere.
And then immediately we have the Lucy and Lockwood banter and the camera like switching to all of their gear before we see them.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, and it sets up both with, I think, the lights and focusing on the gear, how all of this like supernatural ghost stuff is going to be extremely materialistic. We're not like, doing spells. We're not like having incantation circles. We're not like whipping out a spell book to bind the ghost. This is all like stuff that interacts with ghosts. That's how this world works.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, that is a good setup.
I definitely did not have a mouthful of tea to like continue talking to you.
Right. My next note is after Mrs. Hope starts talking, because I don't know, the flow from the car to the door and what they're saying. I would be so interested to talk to somebody who has not read the books if they like picked up on what was going on, and I don't know. It would be I don't know.
I think it sets up what we get later. For one thing, it sets up like Lucy's competence. We have Lockwood is like testing her and she's passing with flying colors. But then later in the episode, we have that exact same thing where Lockwood is like calling out orders and she's like, why would I do that? And he's like, no, that's not what I meant. I meant this plan. And she's like, that also does not make sense. So she like knows the rules better than Lockwood.
Yeah, the rules that he created.
The rules he created. Which is like a dynamic in the team.
Yes, love it. So then they're outside the house and a lady shows up who gives them some forms and talks about her husband having passed away. And I love this bit because when she says it, both of the camera like goes back to Lucy and Lockwood and they both give like a perfectly in sync sympathetic nod.
Right. So sorry.
Yeah,
this is a Tuesday for us.
Yeah, exactly. It just gives like, oh yeah, we've talked to 5 other people whose husbands died this week, but we understand we have to,
Right. This is part of the job.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's also where Lucy like accidentally says adults are pretty useless.
Yeah.
When trying to like talk shop with this woman.
Yeah. And I love a show that in the first 5 minutes is going to put out its thesis statement.
It's really good.
Yeah.
It's really good. Lockwood like gives her a look and looks back at her and like gives her his best smile. And he's like, what we mean is.
Yeah. They can't see ghosts, basically.
Which is like an important note to hit for the audience.
Yes.
And is like the exact way that this show is effortless in a lot of its world building.
So good.
Yeah, there's nothing like Lockwood saying to Lucy, as you know, Lucy, adults cannot see ghosts. We get it in this moment instead, which is like very funny and speaks to character. Lots of things happening at the same time.
Yeah. Although I will say the next section, the flashback section, we do get a lot of that stuff, but it works so well. Like we do get a lot of somebody saying, this is how you do this. This is this. But because of how they did it, it still works.
Oh, yeah. And it's layered. You need to say these things multiple times for the audience to like really have it sink down deep.
Yeah.
But in those scenes, she is a new learner, too. Yeah. So like it's, here she's like an experienced ghost hunter. So it's totally different. That's what I love about the world building here is like there's a lot of confidence right up front, storytelling wise, of like, you're going to get this, audience. I trust you to like keep up with us.
Yes. Yeah. If anybody out there has listened to any of my other podcasts, I hate it when the writers think the audience is dumb.
Yeah.
And this show never thinks that.
It just thinks adults are dumb.
Yeah, exactly. Which I guess with us is, that is, yeah. But that's fine. We're fine with that.
But then we move inside the house, which is a nice, creepy, dark place. And there's this wonderful, very not costly special effect that happens throughout the series that we get for the first time that is beautiful, where all of the sound effects are smothered when Lucy like turns on her psychic ability to listen.
Yes.
It's one of my favorite things in this show. And it puts us like in her shoes. We are with Lucy. It kind of like establishes to me that this is mainly her story.
Yes, because and the camera zooms in on her face, and then you're suddenly like you're still looking at her, but you are in her point of view.
Yeah, you can hear her breath the way that she would. Yeah, all of the close sounds to her and everything else like fades away. It's really, really effective.
Yes, I agree. That is a very smart note to write down here. My note that I wrote about this is that when Lockwood says, should we tune in? They both put down their bags and both of them close their eyes. But like Lockwood's power is sight, so why?
It also bothers me. I was like, what is he doing?
Yeah. Oh, it's great. I mean, I can understand it. It would look weird. Like it fit the scene. I didn't even notice until I was taking notes for it. So, whatever.
Oh yeah. It definitely works, especially for like a first time viewer who doesn't know anything about the world. Like that's the right decision, but it is weird once you know what's going on.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, so like he mentions that he should have brought his sunglasses, and I feel like in the book Lockwood is always wearing sunglasses because of his psychic power of being able to see where people died.
Not always, but it does happen sometimes in the book, yes.
Yeah, I guess I picture the book character with his glasses on all the time as like a compensation for like, I mean, they live in London, so there'd be like a lot of places where people died.
Oh yeah, I never thought about that.
And so it would be like straining on his eyes all the time.
I assume they didn't do that in the show because they just couldn't make it look good.
Yeah, it would be cheesy. That's what I was going to ask you. Like,
I do feel like it would change the tone of the scene.
Yeah, because he never wears his glasses, and this is kind of the only mention that we get of it.
Yeah. I wonder if they would. I guess, you know what? From now on, I'm just going to say when season 2 happens, which is perhaps dumb, but that's what's going to happen. But like the opening scene of book 3, he is wearing his sunglasses, but it is also kind of an emotional scene. So they might want his face there, like that might have been another factor that they, the actor Cameron Chapman is a very good with his facial expressions. And I can see where they would not have necessarily wanted to cover that up.
Yeah. And, sunglasses can be like, in a dark room can be like a pretty affected look.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't necessarily know why he's doing it and all this stuff. I also think there's like kind of a trick going on with Lockwood's presentation in the first episode. Like if you're just coming in absolutely cold and this is the only information you get, I don't think it's until 3/4 of the episode that you can actually trust Lockwood to be like the person that he pretends to be a lot of times, because he's coming off as like compensating and like inadequate sometimes. And it's only like much later in the episode near the end where we see like, oh, he actually can deliver the goods. And so to have him in sunglasses might even make that like much worse. So I don't know. It was just like a thing that I noticed that they mentioned the sunglasses as like maybe a tip of the hat to book readers to be like, yes, we know about this, but think it through, people. It would be a little goofy.
It would be fun to see at least once, or maybe that would make it worse. I don't know, just to see how it would actually look. I'm so interested in so much of the like behind the scenes stuff. Like, did they try it out and think, no, that doesn't work?
Yeah.
And like, there's a scene later that I just really wanted, you know what, I'll talk about it when we get there. So then we have Lucy hears the crashing of the husband's body down the stairs. And that was also really well done, because that's an effect that, again, takes basically zero extra money, just some sound effects and some camera work, but puts you there. And it felt like it was creepy.
Yeah. And Ruby Stokes's reaction is really what sells that.
Yeah.
That she reacts as if somebody really did fall down the stairs on top of her. And of course, like, if you did see the behind the scenes of it, nothing happened at all. There was not even any sound. So like, it's all her acting, I think.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
And then they get tea.
I know. So this is like a very British show.
I love this. Because I too always want tea and then feel better when I have some. So when I was reading the books and watching the show, I was like, yes, Yes, I'm drinking tea right now. I it's the best. The tea and biscuits presence in the books and the show are a strong reason of why I love this series so much.
I love that they kept it so British. There's so much British stuff here. And that this exact thing happens in the book too. And I remember being surprised by it, that we're in a haunted house. We just had an encounter with a ghost, and it's like, want to break for tea? And that's kind of like the humor of the book, is a lot of that same kind of stuff, where it'll be like, they'll be reading a book and it will describe the very gross, like, body parts melting off of this thing. And then someone else will walk into the room and be like, dinner is served. Here's the chicken, like,
Yeah.
So like, that's part of setting the tone early in the book, but it's also just like, I think part of it is getting the emotional comfort level for these characters correct, because they need to be in a certain frame of mind to confront the ghosts.
Yes.
And like, tea and biscuits can help.
Love it. They also have some good banter in the kitchen.
It's great.
Yeah.
Their energy is like really, really good. Cameron Chapman and Ruby Stokes have awesome chemistry.
Yeah. Yes.
At all times. I am also drinking tea during the podcast.
What type of tea are you drinking?
This is like a vanilla caramel. I have no idea of brands. It's a black tea.
Oh,
it has caffeine.
I'm drinking a proper Yorkshire tea.
The company is called Bigelow. I don't know what that means.
Oh, I've had Bigelow. They're not bad. So after their tea, they head upstairs and they have some good banter and tuning in, and then they check out the back room. They investigate around, I guess.
Yeah, and we get an important note here that, again, I appreciate, like, the way that the world building happens about chains versus iron filings.
Yes.
And how, so we know just from that like, iron really matters in fighting ghosts somehow. But it's not like Lockwood kind of like taking chains out of their duffel and saying, Lucy, as you know, iron chains are the best to use against class 2 ghosts because of blah, 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 blah. It's her saying, I think we need chains, and Lockwood being like, yeah, I forgot them. And I'm going to blame it on George. And so there's like character dynamics happening. We're getting information about the world with the chains.
Mm-hmm.
And like, all of that, it feels pretty effortless and like real storytelling.
And I feel like this is the first time that we see, and we haven't even really dived into how the agency is set up or what the rules of an agency are or anything like that. But if you know all that, you really see that this is the first time where Lockwood really, really, really wants to be taken seriously as an adult, but is still a teenager who will forget the most important thing.
Yes. Yeah. And I really appreciate that about this story, that they're not super hyper competent children who are like able to go up toe to toe with adults necessarily. They make teenager mistakes all the time, which is great. I think that's really strong. And this is probably the first spot where, when I was going through the story for the first time, I was like, oh, Lockwood is like Han Solo if he was optimistic instead of sardonic. Like,
interesting.
He's like full of crap a lot of times, but he's like, but it'll be great. It's all going to work out. Whereas like, Han Solo is like spinning his crap, and Princess Leia's like, who's worried? Like, clearly you're anxious, Han. Clearly Lockwood knows that they should have the chains, and he's like, iron filings will be fine. It's totally cool. We got this. It's okay.
I've never really thought about him as similar to Han Solo, but I can see what you're saying. And then very shortly after that, we get our first glimpse of Annabelle.
Yeah. I like the ghost effects. The kind of smoke rising off of them and stuff. I think this is really strong.
Yeah, I do too. I think I obviously have no idea what their budget was or how much these things cost, but I think they spent their money really wisely, because there was never a time in the entire series where I thought, ew.
Yeah.
So all the special effects and the lighting around the special effects, because I know that that can sometimes be the thing that puts them out. I think it's great. They all look great.
Yeah, I wonder how they did this too, because I was noticing, you mentioned the lighting. I was noticing that like she kind of apparates into like a cornice in the hallway or something, and the light is like bouncing off of the ceiling in ways that are interesting. And I was like, oh, I wonder if they like had lights that they were doing stuff with in the shot and then they animated to that, or, you know, how they did it. I'm sure there's an actress, you know, who is doing motion capture and stuff like that too.
Yeah, definitely at least for the face.
Yeah. I really like how you can feel there's a real difference between when she first sees the ghost and when she has this much tighter emotional connection to it at some point.
Yeah.
And the ghost like looks more human, and she can understand her words and stuff. And I was like, oh, that again is like some really strong world building storytelling where we're just trusting the audience that you understand something just happened there.
Yeah. And Lucy tries to connect with the ghost here. And that is also really well done because, like, at first we can't quite make out the sounds, but you can tell it's a voice. And then sort of as she listens more, it coalesces into words.
It's really good.
It's really good. And then the ghost attacks, and Lucy falls over the banister, which is only interesting because it's extremely similar to a scene that happens in book 3. Like, It feels very inspired by something that happens in book 3. And I would be very interested to know, like, did they do that on purpose? Like, they must have. Like, is there a reason they did that? Are they going to cut that from book 3? Or did they have a plan to kind of mirror it? I don't know. It's things like that just make me really fucking want a season 2.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I haven't read book 3 because you're right. This doesn't exactly happen this way in the book. I mean, she attacks, but it doesn't end up in this dramatic situation. Yeah. It's like there's like a literal kind of cliffhanger element to this.
Yes.
And she's like hanging on by the frame. And then this scene like frames the episode. And I was like, Joe Cornish, this is something that I would do, and I don't approve quite so much, but like I think it actually really works well for like I feel very afraid for Lucy in this moment.
Her foot is also stuck in the railing, so it's not just the picture frame that's holding her up.
Yeah. I remember when I read the book and they got to this place, I was like, is this the screaming staircase? Are we here like right away? But it's not.
And then we go to opening credits. And I love these opening credits.
It's very cool.
They do a bunch of like background world building if you watch them, which is very smart for people who haven't read the books. And
it kind of reminds me of the X-Files, the way that it's just in the images.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I was going to say it has this like 80s, 90s feel to it.
Yeah.
And it's so good. And I'm going to take this opportunity to pause here and talk about all the music in the show and in the season as a whole, I guess, although I've really only written down the songs in this episode, and talk about how it adds to the world building, because this is one of my most favorite things about this show, about how, so the books are kind of vague on when they take place. Like, I don't think they ever say a year or give anything other than World War II definitely happened in the past and the problem started
I guess that's true.
50 years ago. Like, that's really the only time period indicators we have in the books.
They come out in the mid like 20 teens or something like that. I think
the first book came out in 2017. Don't quote me on that. I could be
really
wrong.
Wow,
I could be wrong. I'm just going to pause and look that up because now I'm curious.
I feel like they came out in like 2010 or 2012, something like that.
Oh yeah, you're right. First published 2013. Maybe the last book was 2017.
So 10 years ago.
Maybe that's where I was getting that number from. Oh wow, that is 10 years ago. Crazy. Yeah. So, but in the books, they don't have cell phones. They don't have.
Right. They don't look up things on the internet.
They don't look up things on the internet. They're always going to the library, the archives.
Yeah.
Right. And it gives this sense of like, it's almost like it's creepier because you always have to split the party, right? And everybody has to go do their own thing, and there is no
Right.
way to contact them.
Right.
But in a way, it's also cozier, kind of, because like it just has a cozier feel to it. I don't even know how to put that into words. And it makes things more difficult, and it's just a really great storytelling choice that was made in the books. And so Joe Cornish, when he was, writing the series, decided, no, this is present day, 2023, definitely. But because of the ghosts, it even says in the opening credits, like economic crash or not crash. It says something like that.
Right.
Yeah. It's messed up everything, and there's been no digital revolution because so many people have died and so many people have had to put their efforts into fighting ghosts and researching ghosts and doing all that. Yeah. And I love that choice. And so he made that choice, and so he gave everything this look of like 80s, maybe early 90s England, where everything is kind of dark and grungy, and it really just puts you in that feel of like, this is not now. It's so good.
Yeah, it's very like analog, and it's very, there's like technology. It kind of reminds me of the way that they did the His Dark Materials thing too, where it was like, even though it's present day in Lyra's world, it's like 50 years behind because their church has like hindered the technology to the point where they're like in the 1920s or something. It's the same kind of thing, just like you said. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Joe Cornish, who has a very deep history with involvement in music, he chose to reflect that in the soundtrack by basically only using like 80s punk and post-punk and goth music. And it's so good.
I'm very curious about learning about this. I don't know much about like music history. You were talking about this stuff, and to me, like, I don't know. I probably like confused punk and metal too much. I was like, is this stuff punk? Because I was like, there's nobody like headbanging or anything, but I think that's like a totally different kind of music, and I just don't know what I'm talking about.
I'm not knowledgeable. I'm not that knowledgeable either. Other than like I could recognize this music before looking it up as kind of punk rock type things, although it is technically classified as post-punk. I guess punk was more 70s and this is all more 80s. All the bands featured in this episode, other than the opening credits, were formed in the very late 70s and were basically known and performing and stuff during the 80s. This episode, the opening credits song is called Can't Leave the Night by a band called Bad Bad Not Good. They are the only like modern band, I think. And hey, they're Canadian like me, but they're from Toronto, so who cares?
Canadian beef.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. For those who haven't heard, I live in Vancouver, so we just have to, hate Toronto. That's how it goes. But I think they were formed in 2010, and it looks like they're still active or have been. And they are an instrumental band, and they do kind of psychedelic jazz stuff. And I really love this opening credit song whenever I'm just listening to it on Spotify. It's one of those types of songs that makes me want to do like air drums. And
just it's like, super cool.
Yeah, thankful that I'm alone in my office.
It has a good build up to the end of the credits for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good energy.
And I like how, I don't think they do it in this episode, but in later episodes, the drums always come in first before we cut to the credits, and that's really good.
Yeah.
Both opening and closing, because it's the same song.
Yep.
Another great way to save money. So then the songs featured in this episode are Bela Lugosi's Dead by Bauhaus. I've never heard the name Bauhaus said out loud, so my apologies if I'm...
Oh, I think that's right. Yeah.
That's how I would say it. And that one plays during the flashback, just coming up, what we're going to talk about next. And then Sick Child by Susie and the Banshees. And those are both English. Oh, the Sick Child plays when Lucy's in the cafe being looking like she has no hope, and then it sort of carries over into her approaching Portland Row.
Okay.
And then as Lucy unpacks, we have All We Ever Wanted Was Everything, also by Bauhaus.
Yeah, and so that one I noticed because that has lyrics and stuff that I could hear.
Yeah.
Well, it was good. It's very atmospheric. It was really
Bauhaus
good.
has a couple more songs on the soundtrack, and they're always so different from each other. Like each song, like they're a really interesting band. I highly recommend, if anybody liked any of the music, checking out some of their further works, because they really, I don't know, I really like them. They're good, and each song is very different from each other. The ones in the show.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, and punk is like a very, like culturally speaking, is very like teens against adults kind of vibes, which is like perfect, right?
Yes.
And Lockwood and Co are extremely punk for like how there are no adults in our company kind of thing.
And not just that, but like punk rock as a cultural thing. Like nowadays, if you say something is punk rock, you're generally speaking not talking about music. You're talking about an anti-establishment feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another thing why I love that he went with this kind of like punk music, because Lockwood and Co is nothing if not anti-establishment.
That's true. Yeah.
And well, some of the members more than others, obviously, but like in general, they're, especially as they go on and get more involved in the establishment, they're just like, what the fuck? So that's another thing that I love, that the music sort of brings that cultural theme in, as well as setting like the feel for the time period, even though it is present day.
Yeah, that's great. That's really smart. I think you're totally on target with that it's like, it's about a feeling of a certain time and place, but it's also speaking to these themes of the characters in the world. Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, so that was my rant about the music. I will talk about more songs as we get to them in future episodes.
I love it.
Highly recommend the creators or whatever have a official playlist on Spotify that has all the songs on them.
Oh, that's funny. I was just thinking when you were saying all this, I was like, I wonder if there's a playlist. Yeah. Perfect. Okay.
Although mine doesn't have one song from The Cure, and I was like, maybe that's just a Canada thing. Like maybe it's blocked here. So I don't know if they
it's too punk for Canada.
I don't. Well, sometimes it's a rights thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's one episode or one song I think in episode 2 that for some reason just isn't on the playlist, and I don't know if that's just what I'm seeing here in Canada, or if they forgot it.
Or maybe they can't add it in England for the same kind of reason.
Well, The Cure is an English band, so
I don't know.
Anyways, I would be interested in knowing if everybody else is missing. I did not write down what song it is because I'm stupid.
Is that the name of it?
Yeah, exactly. No. A song from episode 2 in the playlist by The Cure. It's by The Cure, but I don't remember what it is.
Cool. Yeah, so after the introduction, we go to a screen that says 3 years ago. So we get a time jump backwards. And Lucy's haircut is so perfect.
Yes.
For making her a younger person.
And they give her braces.
Oh my God, I love it.
They give her braces at one point, and I'm like, yes, that was, yes.
Perfect choice.
It was so good.
Yeah. Oh man. Because I was like, oh God, she looks like she's 10.
Yeah.
I love the interview that this guy has with the mother, and how the whole thing goes. And at the end, he says to her, like, aren't you going to give me a smile, young lady? Right after she's basically sold into slavery for him. And it is just like, this is exactly why Lucy says that, like adults are useless.
Yeah. I wrote that down also because, before that, maybe he's just a bit of a creep, right? But when he says that, I'm like, oh no, this guy's fucking evil. I hate him.
Yeah, he is like in charge of her. He owns her.
It's terrible. And one thing that I think is interesting that they changed from the books is that I think Lucy joins the agency when she's 8 in the books.
Yeah.
And I get that was maybe a money saving thing, because then they don't have to cast an 8-year-old if they make her 13 instead. But also, like, can you imagine this scene with an 8-year-old?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
it's already pretty rough.
Yeah. I will say they don't, in the books, the 8-year-olds don't go on missions, I think, until they're 13.
Right.
But still.
Yeah. They have to train them up and stuff. But it's like, yeah, I feel like all of this is a little bit more accelerated, but I think it's the right choice.
Yeah.
Overall.
It would have been, and it still has a lot of emotional impact with a 13-year-old. I also just
Yeah.
think doing this whole backstory and giving Lucy all this is probably my favorite adaptation choice that they've made, and how it
Yeah.
has ramifications throughout.
So this isn't really in the book this way very much, and I that's what you mean by that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that this gives a lot more vulnerability and a lot more like insight into what Lucy is looking for in the world
Hmm.
and what she needs that she's finding at Lockwood and Co. Her mother is like pretty vile, but what I like about the way that she's characterized is that she's not unusual in the world.
Yes.
So this is like, you can imagine that Lucy's not having a unique experience versus all the other people at this agency. It's probably exactly the same for the most part for a lot of these kids.
Yeah, which is horrific. Also, I love so the books were written, they're middle grade books, right? So they are aimed at, what is middle grade, like 8 to 12 or something like that.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
so all of this stuff I would say is there, but it's all like in the background. You really have to read the subtext to
Yeah.
understand that Lucy, like Lucy thinks about, having lost her whole team and how sad that is. But you don't really think about how, oh, she spent every minute of every day with these people from the time she was 8 in the books to the time it happened when she was 16 or whatever.
Right.
That's 8 years. And then they all died and she was the only one who lived. And she, so
And she feels responsible.
yeah,
Yeah. It just doesn't dwell on it the same way. It mostly touches on the injustice of how it
yes.
worked out. Yeah. With
But,
the owner.
and I do think even though it doesn't dwell on it, you do still see how that motivates her, how that,
Yeah.
but again, but it's all extreme subtext in the books. You really have to be looking for it. And in the show, they're just like, no, no, no. We're dialing this up to 11 and Lucy is messed up and here's why.
Yeah, this is the main part of her trauma, I feel like in the book, is the injustice, where here it's losing her team, losing her family is really what she
Yeah.
says. And losing Nori especially.
Yeah.
And it's also like important to go back to the effortless kind of world building that we see the effects in Nori, who we care about, of getting ghost locked. And so we understand what that means for the thing that could happen to these characters anytime they go on a mission.
Yeah. I think that is a showism. Like Ghost Luck existed in the book, but it was more of like something a ghost would do to you in the moment so that it could then touch you and kill you, or I don't know, whatever, carry out its evil agenda.
Right.
I don't think there was anything in the book about this lasting ghost lock. And I like this change too, because, death is bad, but this is terrible. Like,
Yeah, it's really scary.
I would rather die. I would rather, if I had a friend or a loved one, I would rather they die, because this, like, they're there, but they're not there. And then you have to like choose, do you spend your life taking care of them, or do you, turn off the machines? Like, that's
right. Or what is even happening? Because
Yeah.
it's like a supernatural condition. Is it,
Yeah,
what's going on?
is somebody researching this, trying to figure out if they can ever fix it?
Yeah, the answer is no.
Well, I don't, because it's a showism. I don't know. It's implied no, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's so, that's a very, I like this change that they've made and how it gives this really tragic overview to just everything.
And it happens pretty fast. It's like I care about Nori very quickly. I really hurt for Lucy because of the bad relationship that she has with her mother. And then this is like the first setting where she's like clearly getting appreciation from an adult when she like graduates after saving her team. They give her like the rapier and the book, and she has a little graduation ceremony and all that stuff. And it's clear that like she never got that from her mom.
Yeah.
Of like, good job, honey. You like, I'm proud of you. You did great. And the close relationship that she has with Nori, that's very sisterly, like none of that was happening with her family, and she loses like everything. It's awful.
I also do like the show's choice to cut out in the books. Lucy had 6 sisters. She was the youngest of 7.
Yeah.
And they cut them all out, and that was absolutely the right choice. Her sisters added nothing to the story and would have only like muddied up this
Yeah.
like point that they were trying to make here. Though I will say, in both books and presumably show, we never really get an explanation for why Lucy is so powerful. And I guess I have definitely heard folklorish like seventh kids sometimes, like that can be a thing.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely a folklore kind of thing. The seventh son of the seventh son and all that.
Yeah, that type of thing. So I thought that was interesting, an interesting point that the books had. But I think her character development is definitely more important. And this was
and it's
good.
felt like I guess I get what you're saying, but it also felt like in the books to me that it had more to do with like treating her like a person instead of an instrument, you know?
Yeah.
Like nurturing people actually brings out the best in them. It was more of the theme I felt like from the books than like you were destined to be a powerful psychic instrument.
Yes, that's true. We do never really get an answer about that. Well, like maybe there is no answer. It's just luck of the draw.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Oh, and we should mention in that little grade 3 ceremony that you talk about, rapier grade 3, that is the first time that Lucy is called an asset.
Right. Yeah. A valuable asset.
Yeah.
What a compliment.
Yeah.
What a humanizing way to talk about a young woman.
That's what I dream about. Being an asset to my employer.
Gotta love it. Also, that graduation ceremony happens at the giant gravestone memorial thing where all of the dead kids are honored for protecting their community.
Yeah.
This is grim.
I feel like this would be a good place to mention here. And so in this flashback, we're getting so much world building and so much. And some of it just kind of goes whoosh. That like it is truly wild that they discovered that ghosts kill a lot of people, and then they thought to themselves, how to make money.
Right. Yeah. I have a whole thing about this that I kind of want to talk about.
Do you want later? Do you have a plan for it? But I just think we need to bring it up here, but we can move on.
No, I think it's worth talking about like right now because it is directly related to that whole thing.
Yeah.
So like, I don't think that they ever say this in the show that I can remember. They don't ever talk about ectoplasm in the first episode that I can recall, but it's definitely in the book a lot.
Right. It definitely comes up in the third episode. But
I think it does. They talk about it in the book. In the show, I mean. They talk about it. But there's like, so for me, I just always assumed that like ectoplasm is a thing that was made up in Ghostbusters, you know, like the 1980s movie. Mm-hmm. And that's like how I ever heard about it. But I read like so much paranormal science fiction fantasy type stuff that I learned over time that like ectoplasm was a thing that was coined, like a word that was coined by a scientist, an actual French scientist named Charles Richet. He was like in the 1800s. And this guy was like pretty important for like discovering how allergies work. Like he won the Nobel Prize for that.
Interesting.
So like he's like a kind of important dude. I mean, he was like a huge racist and everything, like a lot of French establishment people at the time. But he was interested in like spiritualism and would go to like seances and mediums all the time and like watch them work. And he was like extremely like gullible, I guess. He was like, it's all real. And these mediums would like produce ectoplasm that would have like faces and stuff. And a lot of people like found out that this was like sacking or like cheesecloth that they were like throwing up, like they had swallowed it, and then it was like, oh, it's all slimy and gooey. Like, yeah, they threw it up. Yeah, so that's gross. But he was like, no, it's ectoplasm. It is a substance that ghosts are made of, or like spirits or whatever these things are, because he didn't believe in ghosts. And because he was a doctor, he was very into like the body having senses and capabilities that maybe we didn't know about. Like they were learning about electromagnetism and how there's all these like fields out in the universe that are real, but we don't have the senses to like take them in. we can't sense like magnetism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he was like, well, what if there is stuff going on and some people have another sense, a sixth sense, a kind of psychic ability that just other people don't have. And that's like a thing that could be happening. And so he like wanted to like systematically kind of intellectualize this whole paranormal kind of stuff. And that wasn't a unique impulse at the time in the 1800s. We were intellectualizing like everything, like, you know, the whole industrial revolution is all about that stuff. We're like taking control of metallurgy and architecture. And what all of that stuff like has in common, once we intellectualize it, it stops like the reason that we do it, that we say that we're learning about this stuff is for progress, for like society, right? But the progress always stops once we intellectualize it, because now it's an economic market. Now it's something that we can make money off of, and capitalism is not interested in progress. It's interested in extracting value. And so like even in his own field of medicine, like we learned a lot about medicine in the 1800s and 20th century, but it's not like we solved perfect health. Like there's no money in perfect health. You know what I mean? And I don't mean to be like a conspiracy theorist when I say that or anything, but there's just not the incentives. That's just a fact of capitalism. There's no incentive in like fixing a problem forever. And so I think it totally makes sense in this world that once you have the problem, you really don't want to have the solution, because there's a lot of value to be extracted here. And you know, the people who are going to have to pay the price in their lives for extracting that value, they're just kids. So who gives a shit? You know, there's money to be made here.
I have a lot of like book 5 stuff I could talk about with that, but obviously I'm not gonna.
Book 5 stuff. Well, hopefully we see it.
Yeah, hopefully. I did want to also just say that during all of my like flashback notes, I wrote down in quotes, "adults are useless" like 3 times. They really explore that theme here.
They love it.
Yeah. And I wanted to bring attention to the scene where Nori and Lucy are talking about going to London. And how Lucy needs to wait to be fully qualified to get her grade 4. And I think that is such an interesting plot point, because it's mentioned in the book that she doesn't have her grade 4 and that is a problem, but then that just goes away. And I love that they made it like a thing here that could really mess her up and stop her from, like they made it a whole thing that has to get solved. And
it's
I
pretty
really
important.
like it. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's this whole infrastructure of regulation where the government is involved in all this stuff, which makes sense. But it's also like another apparatus to extract value from these kids, because it's like they have to go through their little, you know, like karate dojo tests and upgrade their belts and stuff. So it's like another chance to charge them for stuff.
And it's just like classic classism, because if Lucy hadn't gotten hired at Lockwood and Co, she probably would have ended up on Night Watch, because you don't need parental permission or, you know, your grade 4 certificate or whatever for the poor kids on Night Watch. Who also are probably a lot of runaways and that type of thing. And it's less money and more danger. So it's only the agents, the people who are like going into people's homes and blah, 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 that are strictly, you know, quote unquote, kept safe by these rules that they have to adhere to. As soon as you're like just a little bit below that system, though, they don't give a shit.
Yep. There's no protection. And there's barely any protection. I mean, we see when all these kids die and Nori gets ghost locked, the judicial system hands out, you know, like financial remuneration and like pays for Nori's healthcare going forward. But that does not feel like justice at all. In fact, it feels like systemically unjust in the exact way that you're talking about.
Yeah, it's just a lot of more reasons to be a little punk rock.
Yeah. It's great. I love the way the world is set up against.
Well, like I hate it, but it's great storytelling.
it's very like dramatically good is what I mean.
Yes.
Oh, and I also love in the trial the way that he just throws her under the bus.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just fucking... like, ugh. And it reminds me of like the way that the whole economy is set up, just to come back to this again, is like, I mean, it underlines how our economy is set up exactly the same. And like even the military, you know, is mostly like 17 to 19-year-olds in the United States who are deployed to like active war zones to kill other people and be killed in very dangerous situations that they can barely understand, let alone be emotionally prepared for. And then they're like literally wounded for their entire lives, psychically and physically, by it. But then like just the regular economy is also just like, you know, you go to the grocery store and it's usually like a pretty young person who is the one who has to deal with all of the, you know, customers all day long, grinding it out to make money for a person who never comes into that store and does any work at all, is like the person who's extracting all the value from them. It's like, that is the economy. Like if you're appalled by the way that Lockwood and Co.'s world is set up, like that is the way your world is set up. It's just invisible.
Oh man, I'm depressed now.
Well, it's capitalism. I don't know what to say.
Capitalism. I don't want, just in general, I don't want to point out where it happened because I think that'll be a big spoiler. But in one of the conversations here in the flashback, there's a really, really good setup for like some endgame book 5 stuff. And I love how they worked it in. Is really good. I remember hearing that line and being like, oh shit, that's cool that they've put that in there. Yeah,
there's the foreshadowing all around is like really excellent, and it's all just like the world building. It's doing multi-layer work. It's like establishing relationships, revealing stuff about character, and like doing foreshadowing all at the same time.
Yeah, we have that bit where Paul, her Lucy's friend on the team, talks about, like, he has some conspiracy theories about what is actually going on, like that, but they don't know. They don't really get into anything there. But that's a good setup for being like, what the hell is going on? And also sort of showing that the people who are so deeply involved in it also don't really know anything.
Yeah, and they're curious about it. And whenever they talk to the adult about it, he's just like, oh, well, I knew Marissa, like I was in a room with her once.
Yeah.
And like, that's what he cares about, and not like what's happening. He's just trying to like drink away his trauma and stuff from being in their position, however many years ago, 20, 30 years ago, when the whole thing like first started. And nobody's interested in like solving this problem. They're just like coping.
Yeah.
Except for the kids. The kids want to know like why they still have that whole thing, but they don't understand like the position that the adults are in is like, you know, this is a whole thing that we can do. You know, this whole setup is like good for us in a lot of ways.
So we've been kind of all over the place with this flashback, but like eventually everything goes bad and Lucy runs away to London.
Yeah, she confronts her mother after the trial.
Face. I fucking hate her mother so much.
Yeah, she says to her, all I wanted is for you to love me. And she smacks her in the face. There's a really important line here, I think, that Lucy says to her mom that is like another big theme about the difference between adults and teens here, where she says, you are deader than dead, to her mom, because she's saying like, you don't feel anything for me. You don't love me. I don't know if that's actually true about her mother. Like, I think her mother is like also dealing with a lot of stuff and it is like a terrible, vile person and is a bad parent. So like her reaction of anger, I think, speaks against the deader than dead line. But it's a thing that the adults tell the kids a lot, and it's more in the book than in the show, that like your emotions are dangerous. Like literally the ghosts will feed off them and become more powerful because of your fear or anger and stuff like that. And that being an adult is about suppressing all of these emotions, but the emotions are the most like strongest weapon that Lucy has. Her connection to this ghost is special, and the emotional connections that she can make later on in the interview process and all that stuff, that's what's special about her.
Yeah.
And important. So it's like, I think it's a big theme, these emotions and how emotions are like bad according to adults.
I will, yes, that and like all the adults that we meet in this show are old enough that they would not have been alive pre-problem, but young enough that there probably wasn't that much information when they were kids. So it's interesting to think about how they would have grown up and what they would have known and not known about ghosts, and how, like, I think there's a line in the flashback where Lucy says to her mom that she doesn't want to be afraid all the time, and her mom says everyone's afraid all the time.
That's a really good point.
What makes you so special? And I feel like I'm not trying to defend her mom. Her mom is truly a piece of shit.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, people aren't born pieces of shit.
Right.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think about how scared they must have been growing up. And we don't know if her mom ever had any talent. And this is about all the adults. Like when we meet Barnes later, I'd be interested to know what his childhood was like too.
Yeah, because you get the feeling that if you're involved with the agencies at all as an adult, it's because it's the only thing you've known your whole life. Probably. So you probably had some talent, and we'll talk about it more as the series goes along, of like losing your talent and like the entire freak out that must have for you existentially.
Yeah.
And where that puts you as an adult, and then, having to lead kids to probably their death, and training kids and caring about kids and watching them die over and over and over has to be like a whole thing that ruins you as a person.
Yes. Again, I don't want to stick up for Jacobs because, again, another piece of shit. But again, like I said, pieces of shit are made, generally speaking. So it's interesting to think about how.
That's what I like about the story, is like, I think all that stuff is there. And these characters are like fully human in a way that's like really excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
It's something that is another very light world building here in all the flashback stuff that I didn't want to pass over, is that when Lucy and the Jacobs company are like ghost hunting, they're all in uniforms.
Right. Yep.
And have standard kits that they're all taking the same things into the haunted houses with them, as a contrast to what we saw earlier with Lucy and Lockwood just being in like whatever clothes they have. They don't match necessarily.
Right.
And that's like a very light world building element that's there to tell you the difference. I appreciate that stuff.
Speaking of which, we have Lucy in London rejected by all the well-known agencies because she doesn't have parental permission or her grade 4, which I presume,
or like a letter of recommendation. She doesn't have adult approval. That's what it comes down to, right?
Yeah.
No mom, no anything, no certification, no letter of recommendation. Those are all adult credentials.
And then at one point she's sitting in a cafe with some tea, and she pulls out a little advertisement that she missed earlier. It says Lockwood and Co. And that really nice song, Sick Child by Susie and the Banshees, starts playing. It's so good. I love that song. And then it sort of carries over into when she's approaching Portland Row. And we get our first look at Lucy's new home, which is perfect. I love it so much.
Oh, yeah. I love the house. It's very cool. I don't know anything about London, so I don't know if they like talk about its location in the book and like this matches the location in London. I think they were on location when they made the show.
They filmed all the exteriors are filmed somewhere in London. I forget where. And like all the exterior sets in general are filmed around London. The inside is a set, but still I think in and around London.
Obviously.
But yeah, so she knocks on the door. George answers.
And we get George.
And I love this scene because it's word for word from the book. They didn't change a single thing. And it is just fun when they can make that work. Because it's rare in an adaptation that like dialogue in a book works as like something you're saying out loud, as like a scene that they need to do. But anytime that it does happen, I always enjoy it.
Yeah, I love George. his actor Ali is like really, really good at
Yes.
this deadpan, like, who the fuck are you kind of punk attitude.
I'm going to talk about it more in episode 2, but I do think George is the most punk rock of them all and probably the least aware of it.
Yes, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I think that's his whole character right
Yeah,
there.
like Lockwood absolutely thinks he is the most punk rock and does not understand that, no, dude, you own a house in central London.
Right, yeah.
You would love the establishment if you were running the
If you could
establishment.
be in there,
Yeah.
yeah. That's where you want to be. Yeah.
Or he wants to remake the establishment. George
Yeah,
is
yeah,
absolutely like, no, we need to take down this motherfucker.
yeah. Yeah, I love George. His and yeah, we get the dynamic of the three of them in
Yeah.
the room together,
Yeah.
and this is beautiful. It's great.
One thing that I like, or not like, one thing that I wanted to make a note of is when Lucy walks into the room, they do this thing when like Lockwood turns around and looks at her. They do great camera work here where it is very clear to the audience that this is an important meeting. And this is just another situation where I would really love to know what direction the actors were given, because the way that they like stare at each other for a couple seconds without saying or moving, it's clear that the actors were told, you have to act as though right away this is an important connection. And
Right.
I'm just curious about like what the direction was. Like what did Joe Cornish imagine is happening right here between them? Because like I've read all the books, I know what their connection is. I know what's going to happen, but I want to know what his intention was. I don't know. It's just a really great moment, and I like it a lot. And I don't know. That's all.
That's super good. I think it's also calibrated for a non-book reader, first-time watcher to be like, for their mind to jump backwards in the frame and be like, oh, that's the guy.
Oh yeah,
That's the guy that she's with. So
At
this
the
is the
beginning.
place.
Yeah, that's
Now
fair.
she's there. So like, how is this going to work out to where they're at the thing?
I find it basically impossible to look at something and like as though I didn't have the information that I have. You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
just can't wrap my head around that.
That's many years of training for me on my own, writing lots and lots of stories that no one has access to. But
Right, of course.
you just always have to like try and think from the beginner's mind of like, will this confuse the fuck out of people?
Yeah. Hold on. I do want to. We only said his first name, so I just want to look up George's whole name.
Oh, it's Ali. Oh man, I would mess up his name though. I know he's like British Iranian. Hadaji Hashmati.
I'll be able to say it if I can look it up. Look at the spelling. Ali Haji Hashmati.
Yeah,
I just want to say he's great. He is very different from George in the book, but I think
Mhm.
if they wanted to keep the fat phobic dialogue from the book, they needed to not cast a fat character. So, you know, um,
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about that part of it because yeah, I don't like the erasure of like,
yeah, no, I don't like
yeah,
the erasure of a fat character, especially when it gets to be such a hero.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Either that's shitty, but again, they're so fucking mean to George in the books. And,
yes,
like, and in ways that I'm sure I had just have this, feeling in my gut that Jonathan Stroud has never been fat, so he doesn't know how mean he's being.
yeah.
You
That
know,
it's like this
it's
is how
terrible.
teens are. This is how I was when I was a teen. Isn't this funny? And it's like it's not funny.
It's not funny at all,
Yeah.
but it can be kind of funny. Well, like the show fixes a lot of the problems that I had with the book, which I love. Like, thank you. Like Lucy is forever extremely mean to other girls in the book.
Yeah.
And I hate that so much.
Yeah. I don't like it either.
And the show gets rid of a lot of they even give some of her mean dialogue to George in a later episode.
Mhm.
And I'm like, thank you, actually. Love that.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
there's so many little fixes like that that are super smart.
yeah, and I do love that they've diversified the cast a lot. Like I think every single character. Oh, not every single character, but there was a lot of white people in the books, and they've
Mhm.
really they've thrown that out, and I do appreciate that. I do wish George was still fat, but Allie does such a great job. So
he's really good at his delivery, and it does cast that initial line in a different light of like, oh, you're not the donut lady, like that.
Yeah,
whole thing plays differently, but it's still actually really good. Yeah, I mean, teenagers eat a lot anyway, or like whatever, and so it's fine.
It's fine. And we've talked a little bit about Cameron Chapman as Lockwood, but he is perfect. I like no notes. He does that teenager trying to be a serious adult so well, and it is so good here. And he does that sort of like buttoned up, emotionally unavailable, but also like, I really need you to like me. Like he has so much going on and does it so well. And I don't think we've specifically said, but Ruby Stokes is also amazing as Lucy. Like,
oh, she's carrying the show.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about it all throughout, but not just like specifically said.
Yeah,
Ruby Stokes
she's
is
a
amazing.
star.
Yeah,
she's amazing. Yeah, and this is Cameron Chapman's first gig, so I think it's incredible.
Yeah,
like he has so much charisma.
Yeah, I am so interested to see where his career goes after this.
He's great.
Obviously, I want it to go into season 2 and 3 of Lockwood and Co. But after that, I really want to see what all three of them really. But Cameron Chapman has so much on-screen charisma, and like Lucy is the main character, but he does like draw the eye when he's on screen. It's so good. Yeah.
It's the brilliant setup, and it's like it's always in books like this, you know, like you're with Watson so you can watch Holmes, you know. You're with Ishmael so you can see Captain Ahab. And it's the same kind of thing with Lockwood. He's like a hero, he's charismatic. You kind of see him through Lucy's eyes a little bit. Mm-hmm. But he's special. And he wouldn't be as special, I feel like, if we were in his shoes.
Yeah.
We would be loaded
absolutely.
down with all of his insecurities and stuff and be like, he'd be a totally different character.
But I will say the one difference to this is that about the like Sherlock Watson dynamic is that it is Lucy Watson who is the special one in this case.
Yes.
And that does give it an interesting twist.
Yeah. Yeah. So the interview, I love Lucy showing off all of her capability.
We meet Skull. Well, we don't meet him, but he's there.
He's there.
I love Skull. Skull's my favorite character. I mean, Lucy aside, Skull's my favorite character.
You mean the ghost lamp, right?
Right, of course, yes.
I am such an idiot. Yeah, it's really, really good. That's the thing that like scares off the first applicant or the other applicant. She like runs out of the house because of the skull. I love George's energy through the whole thing where he's like constantly trying to wedge himself back closer to Lockwood.
Yeah.
Like we're buddies, right? Like you would never like, you know, break up with me because of her. Like we're cool, right? We're close. She's not coming in, right? I just love George.
I also love this whole sequence is like part number 2 of them trying their best to be serious adults, but so being teenagers. Because they have this very serious interview, and then they have the joke about the toothbrush cup at the end, and the way that they both laugh. I cannot explain it, but that is very teenager. Mm-hmm. I just love that so much. And then the biscuit roll, obviously.
This is a very like first roommates kind of situation, young adult
absolutely. Stuff. And then jumping ahead a little bit when he's giving her the tour and the top security room is unlocked.
Yeah.
The high security room is unlocked, and it's like, yep. Let's just brush over that.
That's all the kind of stuff that I was talking about earlier that I feel like undermines Lockwood as like his presentation is like, I'm very much in charge and capable, but he's constantly like he's forgetting to lock the highly secure room. He doesn't bring the chains. Mm-hmm. He doesn't, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I feel like all of that is building up to pay off in the scene coming up when we snap back to the frame.
Yeah. It's so good. I love every second of these first glimpses of Portland Row that we get.
Oh yeah. It's really, really good. I love that. So they talk about the structure of Lockwood and Co. as a company. Mm-hmm. and how there's no adults, which essentially makes this business like an employee owner co-op type of situation, instead of like they're not franchised out through the government agency where they're getting like government funding. And that is like an anti-capitalist setup. They're like in a profit sharing thing where they're like, they live in the place where they work.
Yes.
And like, it's just a totally different way to do the same job that gives them a different perspective that I think is essential to how they're going to interact with the problem over the arc of the, like, you know, Uber story, the 5-book story.
Yeah, even just the like, hey, you're hired. Do you also want to live here? Like, that's kind of insane when you think about it. But they're just like, yep, you're in. We're good. And now we all live together. And this is something that I think the show does really well, of having these moments where you really see how intimate living together is. Especially when you're like the first couple weeks, when you're just like, so
Getting
we're all in our
each other.
PJs. You know,
she comes downstairs later, and George comes out of the door. He has no pants on.
Yep.
And this really long t-shirt that has the steel claw on it, which I like really appreciate. I was like, oh my God, that 1960s movie. Which I'm sure like Joe Cornish is a fan of that movie. It's like this weird pulp movie of this guy who gets his hand cut off and then like fights Japanese people. He's like a hook instead of a hand and stuff. He fights like Japanese soldiers as a freedom fighter. But anyway, like, so George is a fan
at all.
Well, it's like, I don't know. It's like fighting evil. I don't know.
Okay.
But it's very like pulp, you know, like comic book type stuff.
Gotcha.
So apparently George is a fan. I don't know. But he's there with no pants on.
Yep.
Like, I need to go to the bathroom. And this is just living with people. Like, she sits down on the chair. The apple core is there.
Yep. And just even when she first walks into the library and is like, can I spend time here with you? It's so good.
Yeah.
We should mention also the don't go in there room.
Yeah.
Where that's pointed out. And then eventually Lockwood brings Lucy up to the attic and is like, this used to be my bedroom when I was a kid, but you can stay here if you want. And I love this set that they've made up there. It's so cozy and homey feeling. And then this is when All We Ever Wanted Was Everything by Bauhaus plays, which also has that cozy feel to it. I love how as soon as she sort of says yes to moving in, the feel changes so much in this flashback from the sort of creepy building tension feeling from the beginning to this like homey, cozy feeling as soon as she moves into Portland Row. It's so well done. And when she says yes to moving in, Lockwood and Lucy like smile at each other for the first time, and they're so cute.
It's very adorable.
Yeah.
And he like opens the drapes of the window for her, and her face changes when she can see like London kind of spread out. And it's like, it kind of, for me, goes back to her having that conversation with Nori about like, let's go to London. Let's start our own thing.
Yeah.
She's like doing the dream for Nori on a certain level. She's like, I'm here. I'm doing it. I'm making it.
Yeah. It's so sad.
It's good.
But I'm glad she got out.
Yep. And she found a couple of good, well, they're okay, guys.
They're okay. And then when she's talking to Lockwood in the library, he confronts her about the lack of grade 4, but says, I don't care. You know, you proved that you're good. That's all that I care about.
This makes me love Lockwood.
Yeah.
Like, I trust him.
Yeah.
For this.
Yeah, that's great. And then the best part for me, Lucy leaning in and being like, how do I know you're good enough for me? And then we cut back to...
Yes.
That's
so strong. So strong. Yeah, we go back to the frame we're literally hanging off of.
I love that 90% of this episode is flashback.
Yep.
And it doesn't, like, once you're a good ways into the flashback, it doesn't feel like it anymore. You're just, like, in it. So then the cut back is almost kind of jarring.
It works.
Yeah.
It's very strong.
It's good.
And we don't need all the in-between stuff because you can just figure it out. You're like, oh, yeah. So they've done cases and now we're back here. And You can feel all the character work, like everything makes sense now, why it all played out this way. And is he good enough? And like, yes, he absolutely is. He's amazing.
Yeah.
His sword work, man, I gotta say, like Cameron, in terms of like moving that sword around, I know that it's just like movie magic, but like it's impressive to me.
I'm sure he did a lot of training with it. I'm pretty sure he did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I love coming back to it. I love how much character they put into the sword work. Like when he throws the salt bomb or whatever it is at her, he like hits it with the sword. He doesn't just throw it. And at one point he like his like foot goes up on the wall and he bounces off of it. Bounce is not the right word, but it's what happened.
Yeah, he does like a Jackie Chan thing where he like wall climbs a little bit.
And it's just so clear that even like Lucy may die, there's this terrible, terrifying ghost that could kill them both, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I still have to look cool, everyone.
Just like a somersault. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure, what a badass I am.
I'm sure it's not even like a conscious thought that he has, you know, he's just
excellent. Yeah.
I love Lockwood, George, and Lucy. They're the best. I love them so much, especially I love them in the show even more than I love them in the books. They're fabulous.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. And he pulls her up from there, you know, like he does save her, and the way that they just like clutch each other after that. And that conversation is still like, are you good enough for me? It's like, woof, the chemistry here.
I'm glad you pointed that out because this podcast, I think, is going to be an effort in me not turning into a crazy fangirl. So anytime you can point out a good connection that they have, wonderful. Thank you.
It's great.
Save me from looking a little insane. So then they follow the ghost to where the source is, which is her body in a wall.
Mm-hmm.
They have
she's plastered up there.
They dig her out, but it all kind of goes bad. And then they cover it up with a silver net. But Lucy reaches in to grab a ring that is on the body's finger. Oh, and also they set the house on fire.
Yeah, Lucy has a strong reaction to Lockwood almost getting touched by the ghost. And I don't think that we've said it yet, but like, obviously, if the ghost touches you, then you can be killed.
Yes.
Or severely injured anyway. I don't think it ever happens in the show. Do we see anybody get grabbed? Certainly not in this episode.
I mean,
the other kids that she worked with.
Yeah,
but it's like off screen.
Yeah, but they do have that bit where he pulls her up and says, "Did she touch you?" And she says, "Of course not. I'd be dead." So they do build that in.
Yep.
But we don't see it happen, which is kind of a shame because in the book, Lockwood did get sort of lightly ghost touched here. And had
that we'll talk about that more next episode. I think it's actually a really good choice that they made around that. Or I like it anyway.
I do too.
But there was an important thing that happened right after they're like clutching each other. And she's like trying to tell Lockwood, like, I made a connection with her.
Yes.
And I felt things from her. And Lockwood tells her, like, ghosts don't have feelings. And she's like, no, listen to me. I know what I felt. And I feel like this goes right back to the conversation with her mother where like, you're deader than dead. You don't have feelings. And the whole thing around feelings and Lucy and like trusting yourself and having intuition. It's all like right here. And Lockwood, like you said, as punk rock as he is, he still kind of has that establishment mentality. But what I love about Lockwood is that he will trust her.
Yeah.
He has faith in her. And so he will bend away from what he knows, you know, quote unquote knows, to like what she is telling him.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, she throws the bomb to save him, sets fire to the house. She grabs the ring because in the scenes where she's making those connections, the hand is always extended out and the ring is like very, very in focus. It's always right there in our face.
In the book, the ring was a necklace. But I do like this change that they've made because they're able to put it on the hand that is reaching out from the ghost and make it noticeable. And
I think there are other reasons for it to not be a necklace too.
Well, yes, obviously, but
that are smart.
Yes, but this one in particular that we see in this episode
it's a super smart change, I think. There's only like one thing niggle about it that I don't like, but we'll talk about it in a different episode. as far as changing from the book. But yeah, I like all this stuff. And then they they have
jump.
no choice but to be on the edge of the burning house and take a flying leap.
I love how much this comes up for them, jumping off buildings.
Yep.
I don't think the book keeps it going. The books keep it going after book 2, which is a shame. But yeah, it's a fun time.
It's a strong ending. It makes you want to go right into the next one. Super, super good.
Yeah, I'm almost kind of sad that we have to stop here. And that is episode 1.
Yeah.
God, this was fun. Glad we get.
I'm sorry it went long. It feels like it went long.
No, that was good. I love this. I'm excited to talk about all the rest of them now. So something that we are going to do from now going forward is choose a most punk rock moment or character in the episode. So, Alan, do you have your most punk rock?
I felt the most punk rock that I felt in the episode is where Lucy like goes out of her window at her home and like climbs down and is like off to London.
That's me. That was my choice too.
Yeah.
Lucy climbing out her window.
That's it, man.
That's the most punk rock.
Your mom slaps you in the face, you go start a band in London. Yeah. That's what you go do.
Perfect. I'm so glad we were in sync on that. All right, so that wraps up our discussion on episode 1. If you have a different most punk rock moment, you can reach out to us on Twitter at Lockwood Podcast. Or you can find me on Twitter at Inferior Caitlin.
You can send us an email at contact@hollowedgroundmedia.com, or you can go to our contact page at hollowedgroundmedia.com.
And remember, adults are useless.
That's right.